The Browns are primed to play spoiler to the Bengals in week 1.
Meanwhile, Joe Burrow and the Bengals are eyeing a fast start. It's time for Crossover Thursday right here on Locked On Bengals and Locked On Browns.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in. It's a crossover event between Locked On Browns and Locked On Bengals, the two teams squaring off in week 1 to open up the 2025 season. And it's two teams really that are expected to be headed in opposite directions. Bengals very much in the playoff, maybe even Super Bowl conversation with Joe Burrow. Browns are in the conversation to maybe have the first overall pick next year, but they clash in week 1 with some exciting storylines, which we'll break down with you, including whether or not the Bengals can get off to a fast start this season. We'll also look at some key matchups and reveal each team's path to victory. First and foremost, though, this Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. James, let's start with what you teased in our cold open there, just the idea that this Bengals team, since Zach Taylor's been here, has really struggled to get off to hot starts for the season. Last 2 years, 1-3 to begin the year. The only year they've been better than 500 in the first 4 games of a season was the year they went to the Super Bowl in 2021. But they have seemed to really prioritize changing that this year. Where do things stand, and how has this team sort of approached the preseason and training camp to try to buck that trend that we've seen in recent years?
Yeah, it's been the theme of the offseason for sure. Dating back to January when Zach Taylor made the call to fire Lou Anarumo and multiple other coaches that were under contract. And he mentioned it that day. Hey, we have to start faster. We have to be better early in the season. And it makes sense. And it makes sense for a few reasons. One, the Bengals are really good at playing their best football when it matters. But good teams win games when they're not playing their best football. And the Bengals have struggled to do that in recent years. Joe Burrow's health, a part of that. Last year in week 1, they go up against the New England team that they should have crushed. They should have crushed. Maybe the worst head coach and coaching staff, top to bottom in the league, not a ton of talent. And they lose to Jacoby Brissett. And the offense struggles. And that's not the Belichick defense that we've known. And maybe Mike Vrabel's defense this year will be good. Who knows? But that defense wasn't. So they've tweaked some things. Training camp, they moved their practices to the morning. Joe Burrow played in the preseason. He completed 18 of 24 passes, led them to touchdown drives on all but one of his possessions, and that was with a backup skill player. So they've done everything they can to start fast. They're healthy going into Sunday's game. We'll see. But, yeah, starting fast has been the theme all offseason, and certainly is a theme this week going into Sunday.
Yeah, and it's interesting as you get into like the things that Zach Taylor's done differently this training camp to try to combat that issue. The Browns have sort of seen some similar things as well, some similar changes as well. Kevin Stefanski, I think, realized last year that he sort of ran this sort of, I don't, maybe cupcake's the wrong word, but like a more patty cake style training camp where the goal was, let's just keep everybody in bubble wrap, not get anybody hurt. Let's prioritize that over the physicality of football and getting guys sort of ramped up for the season. And he's changed the way that he went about his training camp as well, where there was actual tackling this year at training camp for the Browns. There was, making sure guys, the first team offense got a chance to play, particularly in that third preseason game, and they had a set amount of plays they were going to play, and they saw all through that amount of plays. In the second preseason game, you saw some of the starters, the first preseason game, you saw some of the starters kind of get out there and play a little bit, but he navigated that a little bit differently. It was more physical. There was more time spent trying to really work on certain key situations and doing it at a high level. You could tell the coaches had a different intensity about the way things were being run as well. And so it is almost these two prevailing mindset changes that are going to sort of meet here in week 1. And I think it's interesting because, of course, as when you look at these two teams on paper, nobody's going to sit there and say that the Browns should win this game and that they have a chance to win this game. But at the same time, it's a division opponent. It's a division rivalry, two teams that know each other very well. And for whatever reason, on top of the Bengals' slow starts, aside from last year where the Bengals obviously swept Cleveland, the Browns have fared decently well against Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor in recent years, which is part of the reason why I feel like this is a really good opportunity for the Browns in a season that I'm not expecting a lot of wins. Maybe can steal one in week 1 because the Bengals tend to have some struggles figuring out their identity early.
And so that's why this is the ultimate measuring stick. Did all these things that Zach Taylor implemented, fast start wise, Joe Burrow playing in the preseason, will it pay off? Because, and I don't think this is controversial, the Bengals should beat the Browns Sunday. I'm not saying they will, but they should. One has Joe Burrow, the other has Joe Flacco. You know, and you just go down the list. And we can get into matchups because there are some juicy matchups. And that's why I think the Browns have been a thorn in the Bengals side. But yeah, it's, to me, I'm like, all right, well, if this defense is any better in Cincinnati, they should be able to go to Cleveland and slow down Joe Flacco in that offense, in that running game led by Jerome Ford potentially for week 1. And so that's reasonable. That's a reasonable thing that a good team would be able to do, even if they're not great on defense. And then offensively, they should have enough answers to where they can still generate points, even if some of those things that the Browns have been able to do in recent years, which we'll get into, do come to fruition. And they do that again and are able to get after Joe. Even if those things happen, the Bengals should have answers to them if they are this playoff team, if they did do enough to start fast. And so we'll see. It's one thing to say, oh, well, on paper, and it's a whole nother thing to go out there and do it. And I think that's what's so interesting about this matchup on Sunday.
Yeah, no, 100%. And especially on paper, when you have the quarterback that the Bengals have, of course, they're going to be the favorite team. Everyone's going to look and say, when you have that guy under center, you should win. And I do think that is the one thing, like the Browns are not built to win a shootout style game. And if that's what this becomes, because I do have some doubts about how good the Bengals defense is going to be, then yeah, I think Joe Burrow has a chance to, really pull this thing out at the end, even potentially with like a game-winning drive, because that's what he does best. He's great in crunch time, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in this league. But if that defensive line for the Browns, which I know we'll talk more specifically about matchups here coming up, it can do what they've done to Joe Burrow in the past, keep it close. My big thing this entire offseason about the Browns and why I think this year, I get why the conversations around this team are, well, hey, they're basically playing for the first overall pick, and where are they going to end up? And people are playing the FanDuel bets on whether or not they are going to get the first round pick, the first overall pick. I get where people are at in doing those things, but my biggest argument has been if this team can just get average offense, because last year that offense was historically bad with Deshaun Watson, and then Jameis Winston came in and gave it some life, but it was short-lived because he was turning the ball over too much. If they can just be average and protect the football even a little bit better, they're going to be a lot more competitive in games this year than they were last year. And so that starts obviously here in week 1 against a Bengals team that very well. And it's part of the reason why I think they have a shot in this game, because I'm envisioning that the offense, even with a 40-year-old Joe Flacco, is at least going to be an average group. And to your point, it's why the Bengals can't, come into this game taking the Browns lightly, even though we know where these two teams are sort of projected to be.
No doubt. And it sets it up perfectly, because the matchups are why the Browns have been a thorn in the side of the Bengals and have given the Bengals trouble. So let's do that. Let's talk about these matchups and key players that are going to decide Sunday's game coming up next.
It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered the most. Let's break it down. For Locked On Browns, well, listen, we know the Browns are looking into this 2026 quarterback class, and so I'm actually going to the college ranks before the season kicks off in the NFL. And I'll tell you, Garrett Nussmeier delivered in a big way, leading LSU to victory over Clemson with a game-winning touchdown in the fourth quarter when the pressure was on. He came through with no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance wasn't a fluke. And just like the potential future Cleveland Browns quarterback Garrett Nussmeier delivered this week, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. All right, James. So as we get back to it here, and we alluded to this a little bit in the first segment, just some of the key areas where these teams maybe have some strengths and weaknesses and how those sort of stack up with each other. And I think one of the key areas that I look to first in this matchup, especially as I, try to sort of project how the Browns are going to win this game, is that defensive front. We know that Myles Garrett has been a kryptonite of sorts to Joe Burrow over the years. And this year, I actually think that the Browns have put together maybe arguably the best defensive line in Kevin Stefanski's tenure since he's been here as the head coach, in terms of just the front four guys, but then also the depth that they have sort of rotating in. I think this unit is really strong. It is easily the strongest position group on the Cleveland Browns this year. And I know the Bengals, who obviously still haven't named a starting right guard as of recording this, there's some concerns there up front for them on the offensive line, even with some of the tweaks that they made. And so I think this is an area where if the Browns can exude their will, if you will, they have a chance to really disrupt things for Joe Burrow as they've done in the past and maybe level the playing field a little bit.
For sure. I think that's the key to this for the Browns, is that Myles Garrett and Mason Graham and heck, Malik Collins, that you look up and it's like, man, these guys are getting after Joe. They're not allowing the Bengals to get going on the ground. They're not giving him enough time to be explosive, all of those things. And we've seen that in the past. Like, Myles Garrett is obviously number one, and that matchup is the entire Bengals protection group. So offensive line, running backs, tight ends against 95. You cannot let Myles Garrett wreck the game. You can't let him impact the game so much that your offense can't operate. And we've seen that in the past. And what I think is going to be interesting is how the Bengals combat that, because they should, even with all the additions, the Mason Grahams and Collins and all these guys. And you mentioned the depth. I like the depth that they have for sure. But for the Bengals, they should have enough answers on offense. They bring back Mike Gesicki. They have Andre Yosavashi. It isn't just the Jamar and T show. So even if Denzel is great and takes away Jamar, even if T doesn't have the biggest game, they should have other answers, and Joe Burrow should have other buttons he can go to and push to have more success than we've seen in the past when the Bengals were running that spread offense and they go to Cleveland and they just get punched in the mouth. So I'm curious to see, one, will the Bengals be able to hold up in protection? And if they can't, what answers they have, because they should have enough talent to still be able to put up yards, move the ball down the field, but they haven't been tested like this. And it's been such a unique matchup. I think that's honestly where the game is probably decided, not just trenches, but can the Bengals protect Joe? And if not, how do they respond? That's the matchup of the game for me.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that's kind of been the key matchup, I think, in previous meetings between these two teams as well. You mentioned, obviously, Joe Burrow's weapons. The matchup on the outside, the receivers versus the Browns DBs, is always a fun one, because I feel like there's always a little smack talk that goes on leading up to this game. We'll see if any happens this week. But there's also like a mutual respect there. Like, Denzel obviously respects the hell out of Jamar Chase, and vice versa. Jamar Chase knows Denzel is one of the best corners in this league. And I think off of that, though, like, yeah, maybe Denzel does kind of limit Jamar Chase. He has the ability to do that. But what I think is going to be interesting is opposite of that, and you brought up T. Higgins, what Greg Newsome can do on the outside against T. Higgins. He's normally the Browns slot corner. He's normally their nickel corner. But because Martin Emerson Jr. is out for the season, he's now bumping outside. And this is a big season for Greg Newsome for a number of reasons, but mostly because it's a contract year, 5th-year option of his rookie deal. But he's always wanted to play outside corner and get that big money where the big money comes. And so this is an opportunity for him in week 1 to have to lock down. Like, there's not a lot of teams that have like a 1-2 punch that the Bengals have. And so it's not like you can just kind of take lightly whoever you're playing opposite, because you know Denzel's got the number 1 guy locked down. Like, you have a test out of the gate here with T. Higgins, and I'm curious to see how he handles that, being on the outside more primarily this year than he's been in the past.
Yeah, it's such a fun matchup. You're right. I go back to So Jamar Chase's first year, they went to the Super Bowl, and that was still like COVID rules. We weren't in the locker room. We talked to Jamar, but it was on Zoom. So that following spring, so they make this improbable run to the Super Bowl, and it's like, man, Jamar wins Offensive Rookie of the Year. And I asked him, like, who's the best corner you faced? Like, the first time I met him in person, and he'd been in the league a year, and I'd covered him for a year. And I'm like, who's the best corner? And he said Denzel. And that might have changed. I don't know. Yeah, he gets asked that all the time. But like, that's a real matchup. And then you have it's on site when we see Cleveland. Like, there's a real respect factor when it comes to that. And that's what's so interesting, because it's Myles Garrett, it's Joe Burrow, it's pass rush versus protect Joe. And yet the more fun matchup is exactly what you're talking about, is this secondary versus this Bengals offense and offensive weapons. The other thing I'm going to be looking for, Spencer, is how this defense, which I have zero expectations for. You mentioned you're not sure if they're going to be good. I don't know what to expect. I do know that Trey Hendrickson's good at football. I think Logan Wilson still can play, but we'll see. I like what I've seen from Shamar Stewart, but he's got to go out there and prove it. And a lot of the secondary is the same. I'm a big believer in Dax Hill, but they all have to prove it. None of those guys outside of Trey Hendrickson has established themselves in the league. And so what an opportunity. You mentioned the opportunity for Greg Newsome. What an opportunity for this Bengals defense to show, hey, we are better than last year, because we're not going to let Joe Flacco and Jerome Ford and Dylan Sampson and David Njoku and all of these guys go. And obviously it goes without saying with Jerry Jeudy, but I'm trying to name all the guys that I think could make a major impact. Like, not let them put up huge numbers on us. And we'll see if they can do that. I'm not going to, I wouldn't wager on FanDuel that they're going to do that. But I think if they are a good defense, good defenses will do that to the Browns in their current form.
I'm glad you mentioned the Bengals defense and gives us just sort of pivot here to that side of the ball, because you mentioned a lot of the Browns, notable weapons. But I'll say this, like, one guy who I think, and I've been telling people, friends of mine who are in fantasy leagues or whatever, who text me and they're like, hey, who's maybe a person on the Browns that we should be keeping an eye on, or any insight you have. And the guy that I think is kind of the Browns' secret weapon this year is Harold Fannin Jr., the rookie tight end out of Bowling Green. And the reason I say that, James, is because we know with Kevin Stefanski, the Browns run a ton of 12 personnel. They love having two tight ends out there. You already know what David Njoku can do. Him and Joe Flacco, the chemistry, they're trying to sort of they've been trying to rekindle that all preseason from 2023 when he was a Pro Bowler, and that certainly still exists. But they are using Harold Fannin Jr. in a lot of different ways. He was part of a couple of trick plays that they ran during the joint practices with the Eagles. They're getting him in different spaces that he's lined up outside. He's lined up in the slot, but primarily I think you find him sort of in the slot. And he is going to be sort of this extra weapon for them, especially because they don't have a ton of talent after Jerry Jeudy, obviously, at the wide receiver position. I wouldn't be surprised if he spends most of the season as like sort of their pseudo slot wide receiver, if you will, and he becomes a valuable piece for this offense. So him versus maybe a Dax Hill, him versus I don't, you probably know better than me, like how the Bengals kind of handle, like a linebacker, like Demetrius Knight or whoever it's going to be, like how they sort of defend him. And his ability to sort of create opportunities for himself and get open, I think is going to be an interesting thing to watch here in week one, and really maybe set the tone for a big season for one of the Browns' top rookies.
Selfishly, I hate your comments. And here's why. Because I might have had a little Cedric Tillman stock. And that's where I thought you were going, is Cedric Tillman. And I was like, ooh, and then you got me. You said Harold Fannin Jr., who obviously Bengals fans followed pre-draft. He ends up in Cleveland. Makes a ton of sense on how they run their offense, that he could make an impact with like opposite David Njoku, given where they're at behind Jerry Jeudy. But man, I was let down when you said that. I was hoping you were like Cedric Tillman Jr.
Hey, it's no disrespect to Cedric Tillman. I really like Cedric Tillman. I think what's interesting with Cedric Tillman is last week, even we were talking to him for like the first time all camp because he was injured a little bit. And he even said like, yeah, I appreciate the fact that the Browns didn't go out and try to get another number 2 receiver, and that they put their faith in me, but it's up to me to prove it. And I think he has the right mentality about going out and like showing that last year when he was starting to turn that corner, it wasn't a fluke. So hopefully he's able to do that for you in whatever fantasy league you have him. Regardless, we are going to talk about both these teams' paths to victory this weekend. We know that the Bengals with Joe Burrow certainly have a leg up, but how can the Browns maybe stifle him, try to steal a win here in week 1? We'll get into all those things here coming up on this crossover episode of Locked On Bengals and Locked On Browns. We at Locked On NFL have an important request. We want to hear from you. We put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and how to make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can find the link in the show notes as well. Thank you for helping us out. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive. And that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every detail. Mazda offers more than safety. It's won the 2025 IIHS Top Safety Pick, plus more awards than anyone else. As football players focus on every detail, Mazda does the same. From metallic accents to hand-stitched Napa leather, whether it's a quick drive to a practice or a weekend road trip, Mazda makes even everyday drives feel special. It's the small details that make the big plays, and just like there's more to every player, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved.
Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel and the Bengals 5.5-point favorites over the Browns. And whether it's Bengals, Browns in the Battle of Ohio or anything else NFL, the NFL season is here. FanDuel is going to make sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you get $300. That's right, $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So maybe you think that the Eagles are going to kick the crap out of the Cowboys on Thursday night. I'm sure a lot of people do, whether it's that matchup, whether it's the Battle of Ohio or any of the week 1 matchups, throw $5 on it. And boom, when that first bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
All right, James, let's talk about some paths to victory for both these teams. We know, as we talked about, the Bengals tend to get off to slow starts, but they're trying to do things a little bit differently this year. Some questions about the defense, but what do you think it's going to take for the Bengals to do what everyone expects them to do and, not be upset by this Cleveland Browns team in week 1?
Starting fast may be a theme of the season, but it's also a theme of the game. The last thing you want is that Cleveland Browns crowd to get into it, that defense to get into it. Getting a lead early is huge. When the Browns have blown out the Bengals and given Joe Burrow trouble, they've jumped out early and they've made life tough because then they know Joe is passing because they got to try to get back in the game, right? So that is a huge key, starting fast. 2, it's, of course, keeping Joe Burrow upright. You keep Joe Burrow upright, you're going to have a chance against any team in the NFL. And so not letting Myles Garrett and Malik Collins and Mason Graham, especially Mason, you can't let this rookie come in and have splash plays on you right away. You expect some of those from Myles Garrett, but limit them. And then 3, you mentioned the defense. The defense show that you can be a competent unit. And if they do that, that doesn't mean that they're going to shut out the Browns, but it means they're going to force a turnover or 2. They're going to force multiple punts in the first half, and they're going to put the offense in position to get out to that fast start and build an early lead. If they do those things, I think they're going to be in pretty darn good shape. But what about you? What do you think from a Browns perspective? What's the secret sauce, the formula to get to 1-0? Because I got to be honest with you, Spencer, if I am driving down 71 on Sunday night and the Browns have beat the Bengals and the Bengals have started 0-1 for a 4th straight year, Cincinnati is going to be really, really frustrated and angry. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, and I think rightfully so. I mean, obviously all the optics around this game, it's going to lean Bengals for obvious reasons. And I certainly wouldn't begrudge Bengals fans if they feel that way should the Browns win on Sunday. I think the theme of this show has been centered around that Browns defensive line. It is the strongest unit on this team. The defense is going to go as that unit goes, but so I think is the Browns, or so are the Browns, I should say. And I think it is going to be about them making life very difficult for Joe Burrow. I mentioned like the Browns not being built for a shootout. I think where the Browns' weakness is on defense is actually in their secondary, because without Martin Emerson Jr., they've kind of been, I think, exposed a little bit in terms of the depth that they have back there. And so it's going to be up to that defensive front to get pressure and make sure that Joe Burrow doesn't have time to just dissect that secondary and, slice and dice them up and down the field to put up a lot of points, because you want to avoid having to get into a shootout with Joe Burrow. As much as I still think Joe Flacco can run this Browns offense effectively, which is why they brought him back here, I don't think he's at a stage of his career where he's built for that type of game where it's going to be like 42 to 38 or something crazy like that. Like, they need to try to keep the scoring to a minimum from Cincinnati, and getting to Joe Burrow is going to be the first part of that. From there, though, I do think you talk about a fast start for the Bengals. Mm-hmm. One of Kevin Stefanski's calling cards in the early years of his tenure here was that he always scored some sort of points on the opening drive of a game. Whether or not the Browns start with the ball first or they get it second, they have to take that opening drive down and punch in, get something on the board, some form of points on the board. Because like you said, when these games have generally gone in the Browns' favor, it's because they've put the pressure on Burrow to, hey, you really got to throw your team out of this thing, and you want to sort of create that pressure as early as possible. So those are two of the big things I'm looking at. I do think this Browns run game is going to be a key all season, because going back to Stefanski's offense, the West Coast play action style where they can sort of air it out a little bit once that play action game really sort of gets going, they need to have an effective run game. I don't have a ton of confidence in this Browns run game as currently constructed, just because your top ticket item, Quinshon Judkins, still isn't here. But this Bengals defense, as we've talked about the concerns on that side of the ball for them, feels like an opportunity to maybe build some momentum there. In the preseason, they were giving up, I think it was like 10.6 yards per carry to the two teams that the starters played against, the defensive starters played against. So I think there's going to be some opportunities there. They got to take advantage of those. And obviously, it's the most cliche one ever, but protecting the football has to happen. And that can be sometimes hard for Joe Flacco. He's one of those gunslinger style quarterbacks. But if it's going to be a repeated Jameis Winston from last year, then yeah, this Browns team is going to lose a lot of games because they're given too many other opportunities to the opposing team. So they got to be able to protect the football and sort of manage the clock in a way where Joe Burrow has it less. Yeah,
I totally agree. I totally agree. Keep the ball out of Joe's hands, and when he does have it, make him uncomfortable. That's the key. I think Joe just has a lot of answers right now. And if it's not going to be Jamar and T, then it'll be Mike Gesicki and Andre Joseph. And if it's not those guys, you got Chase Brown in the backfield.
Yeah,
and if it's not those guys, Brown. You have Noah Fant. Like there's so many layers to this offense right now. I think they're going to do enough offensively. And then defensively, I think they'll be a bit better than people are expecting right now this week. I don't know that. I don't have high expectations because I have zero expectations for this defense, but I think they'll do enough. And so my prediction, I'll say 27-13. Not that it won't be rugged and slow moving. I don't think the Bengals jump out early. It's not going to be a blowout, but it ends up being a 2-score win where this Bengals team plays pretty well considering it's week 1 and they're known for their slow starts.
I was going to ask you too. I'm assuming there's no restrictions for Trey Hendrickson this week, right? Like, I know he's been around, but he hasn't really been like fully practicing, but he's expected to just like be out there week 1 without any snap counts or anything, correct?
That's the expectation. Yeah. Is that he's just going to be out there. And honestly, I think they would love to limit his snap count a little bit just because he is 30 and he plays a ton of snaps, and you want him on those money downs to be Money Hendrickson, right? So wouldn't shock me if he plays maybe a few snaps less, but no, I think he'll be pretty much full go.
Okay. Yeah, it's good to know. I think good context for Browns fans to think about for this game. Listen, I'm not going to tell anybody to do what I'm about to do because I get it. It's the Bengals and they have Joe Burrow, and those are some lofty things to overcome when you're a team like the Browns, given their current state. But the history of the Bengals slow starts, I know they've tried to combat it this offseason. The defensive questions that I have, I think and I've talked about this all offseason. It's not really a surprise because in this first 6 games that the Browns play, 5 playoff teams, the Bengals the other one, which were almost a playoff team last year. This is the one game that's felt like, hey, this could be the one that you steal, right? Because week ones are fluky. Teams are sort of figuring things out. The Bengals are maybe the epitome of that in recent years. And for whatever reason, Myles Garrett and that defensive line have been sort of a kryptonite to Joe Burrow. So I'm going to predict the Browns win. Get off on a high note to start the season. I'm not saying this means playoffs or anything. I'm still keeping my general win total for the season at like 6 wins. But I think they steal one against the Bengals in week 1. I'll say final score of 27-24. What did you say? 27-24?
27.
Did you say 27-24?
I said 27-13.
Oh, okay. 27-24. I think the Browns win it by a field goal.
If any defensive scores, are the Browns putting up 27 points?
I think the defense gets a turnover that gives the offense a short field. I don't know that they're going to score themselves, but I'll say they get a turnover that gives them a short field.
20 real points then. I'm just
yeah.
Can't let it happen, Bengals.
Against this Bengals defense, though, I mean, anything's possible.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that cannot, should not happen if they're good. But that's what's so much fun about this week is it's AFC North. No one knows what's going to happen.
Exactly. And listen, nobody thought the Browns were going to beat the Ravens randomly last year in the middle of the season either. And somehow they pulled it off. So, it's the fun of the AFC North. And we are certainly looking forward to covering it with you guys on Sunday. I'm sure many of you will be glued to your TVs watching this one go down. But that's going to do it for us. We appreciate you stopping on by for this crossover episode of Locked On Browns and Locked On Bengals. We will obviously be doing this again. I won't see you again, James, until week 17, the farthest apart that our 2 crossover episodes can be. So
week 18, even farther.
Yeah, week 18. You're right. Sorry. That 17 game schedule just still not sticking for me. But we appreciate you stopping by. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Bengals or Locked On Browns if you haven't done so already. And make sure for your second listen that you check out Locked On NFL season previews over at Locked On NFL. We've got every division winner, breakout stars, and Super Bowl contenders, an 8-episode series with everything you need to know about the 2025 NFL season. You can find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. For James, I'm Spencer German. Appreciate you guys stopping by. Enjoy the game on Sunday, and we will talk to you guys again real soon.